Ladies and gentlemen, something transpired over the past few hours that hardly ever transpires. I go to the library about every 2 weeks. When I go to the library, I usually get about 6 or 7 books. Figure I can read a book in 2 or 3 days and get something new. When I go, I get a variety of books. I like to get books about science, books about history, books about the human body, books about dieting, all sort of interesting subjects. Now, normally, one of the books I get is really fascinating. It's beyond my expectations. And then the rest of them meet my expectations, meaning I'm not disappointed. They provide valuable information. They are written in a nice, concise manner. And it is what it is. But this is one of the few books right here that is utter and complete garbage. Now, it's not garbage because of the way it was written. It's not garbage because of the events, which are in chronological order. It's garbage because the author has a preconceived anti-bias against Napoleon. Now, a polarizing figure such as Napoleon is going to have many myths, legends, and half-truths sprinkled in. But it's the job of the author, who spends years and years researching this stuff, which is why they have over 10 pages of notes in the back of the book, which I, by the way, looked at, is supposed to be not bias for them, but not bias against them. Now, Napoleon was a tyrant when it came to political rule. He did control the press, and he did have his issues. But there is no doubt that he was not a military genius. He was not very good at creating narrative. And especially on the island, I think it was called St. Helena, where he was ostracized by the British near the end of his life, he basically rewrote his entire history. So it's probably somewhere in between what he says and what Alan Forrest says. Now, I read till about chapter 9. Let's see how many pages I got into this thing. I got pretty far. I got into chapter 9, which is 195 pages. Now, by that time, the book should be interesting. Now, parts of it were. In chapter 1, he went into how Napoleon's body was received. Very interesting information. In chapter 2, he talked a little bit about Corsican, which is the island Napoleon grew up on. Very interesting stuff. He went into the background of the culture of the people and part of the reason Napoleon was what he was, how he was. Part of that nature versus nurture debate. Now, I give him credit for doing that. But the rest of the book up until chapter 9 was complete and utter garbage. He went out of his way to diminish Napoleon's achievements and try to grandiose his failures. Let me read you a paragraph in the last chapter, page 313, that will surmise basically what this author tried to say in this book. Now, it says right here, let me do this so I can read better. Napoleon had shown, now listen to this is his whole narrative, repeatedly throughout his career that he was a master of persuasion and an arch propagandist, aware of the power of words and phrases, images, and music to win over public opinion to his cause. His victories, his venture into Egypt, his marriage, his relations with men, his youthful experience as a revolutionary general, and his long hours spent as a ruler and legislator in the interest of his people. Now listen to this. Every aspect of his colorful career was carefully published in newspapers and bulletins to construct a heroic image that would be passed down to posterity. Now, part of this is true and part of this isn't. Yes, Napoleon did control the press. Yes, Napoleon did try to construct an image of himself. But the author makes it as if every single thing this dude did was minimized. Literally, I read about his conquering of Belgium and Holland, and he's like, despite this many troops dying, despite this and this and this, Napoleon reported back how great it was. Now, here's the thing. It is undeniable that Napoleon, during his day, conquered Egypt, Belgium, Holland, much of Italy, Austria, much of Germany, Poland, and Spain. And France directly conquered or controlled through alliances most of Western Europe by 1812. Now, a guy who does this can't be lucky every fucking time. I mean, I get it, in Egypt it was overblown. And I get it, he mixes legend, but you gotta give the dude some fucking credit for doing all that. I mean, you're a fucking professor that sits on his ass and writes. Again, Napoleon was a tyrant. Napoleon was a bad ruler, but it's undeniable that he was a great military leader. He was very strategic. He was very smart, very innovative in his war tactics. But one of the achievements he did have was he created the Napoleonic Code. This was when he was constable before he became emperor. But I mean, he was basically a dictator during this time. And it's the French Civil Code. It was made in 1804 and is still in use today. And even in the book he said, yeah, even though Napoleon added it, I mean, he didn't do most of it. It was mainly somebody else. And I looked for the notes on that, and it was somebody else's written account. So it was basically somebody else's narrative. He saw that it was negative to Napoleon, and he published it because he hates Napoleon, which is fine. But don't write an entire book and waste my fucking time if you're going to be this biased, dude. Because when I went in the library, I wanted to hear about Napoleon. And that was, I typed it in on the catalog. The first book I found was this. And I'm thoroughly disappointed. One last thing of note. When Napoleon went into Egypt, he brought 150 scientists with him, and they founded the Institute of Egypt. And this is when they started doing Egyptology and really studied the history of Egypt. And they brought some of the artifacts back to museums. In the book, Alan Forrest is like, he wanted to seem super intellectual to the scientists. That's why he brought them, because he wanted to be everything. He couldn't even give the dude credit for that shit, you know? So, Alan Forrest, I'm never reading your shit again, dude. You're so biased. And again, I'm not denying Napoleon wasn't a tyrant. I'm not denying this and that. I'm not denying he didn't exaggerate it. But the dude that conquered all that shit and did some of the things, he's not lucky every fucking time, dude. Nobody gets lucky every fucking time. Eventually, you gotta start giving them credit. And I'm unbiased. I give people credit when credit is due. I give you credit for a few good things in your book. But most of it sucked.